This has been an absolutely amazing trip. Someone said, what's it like being back? And I said, it's like putting on an old pair of slippers, which might sound insulting, you know, like you guys have the old pair of slippers, but I just love Australia. And I feel like I've come home to a bunch of weirdos who understand my sense of humor, you know, and it's really quite lovely. And I had such a great time with my folks, great time in Adelaide, and I was born in Sydney, actually. Did you know that?
No, I did.
I was born in Ryde Hospital. And my dad was in the Navy. We went back to South Australia, grew up there. So this is the last time I was in Sydney, I was 12, I think. So
wow.
How has your experience been?
Oh, it's been awesome. I got to see a koala up close. That was awesome. Got to hand feed some kangaroos. Had some good Lebanese food while I was here. So, but I learned on my last trip to Australia the real secret of eating with a Lebanese family. Don't sit next to the mom, okay? She will feed you till you explode. And I remember being over in the Holy Land, and I was eating it with a family over there, and I sat next to the mom, and she just kept piling it on. It got to the point where I just couldn't take it. And I'm like, I really can't fit that in. And she said, fold it in half. And I said, it's the same amount of food if you fold it. She's like, eat. But it's been awesome. I've had a blessed time here.
You have an amazing level of stamina, right? I got here 9 days ago. I'm still bloody tired. You got here yesterday on a plane. And how many talks have you given?
Well, I guess we technically had 4 yesterday. I think this would be kind of the 5th kind of thing today, and then we've got 2 more tomorrow on the plane, and then home. So.
Whereas yesterday, I'm like, Charbel, I'm really going to need a break. And you were non-stop. It's very impressive. Have you always been like that?
Yeah, because when I travel on the road, we try to condense all the presentations to get to as many kids as possible. So we'll typically do 3, 4, 5 assemblies a day. I remember coming to one school when I was just getting started, and we did 8 presentations in one school because they didn't want to have separate assemblies. They wanted me to get all the students 8 classes in a row. And so I just kind of got used to being able to say, hey, I'm just going to go full tilt on this and give everything I got. And then, and that way it affords me the opportunity to reach as many teens and still get home with the family instead of kind of stretching it out or doing fewer presentations. So,
what's the most awkward thing that's happened while you gave a presentation?
Where to begin? I had a school catch on fire once during a talk. I've had multiple.
Whoa! Stop! What happened?
Doing an assembly, there's probably 1,400 8th graders in the auditorium, and this woman just walks right down the middle aisle where I'm on stage in the middle of the talk. She says, come here. I'm like, can I help you? She said, the school's on fire right now. I'm like, run for your lives! No, I said, kids, we're going to have a little recess right now. So that one was kind of weird. I've had multiple kids pass out during the assembly, typically during the STD part of the talk, which is kind of funny enough. But that happened multiple times. I remember 2 girls in a public high school broke out in a fist fight in the middle of the assembly, and I had to kind of jump in and break that. But I think one of my favorite ones is I bring a volunteer up on stage, a high school boy. I tried to pick a big guy, and I picked this guy, and there's like 400, 600 high school boys, and he raised his hand. I'm like, yeah, come on up. He comes up on stage, and he's a big kid. I'm like, oh, what's your name? He said, Potato. As we're speaking, I can hear the metal underneath the stage starting to bend and creak under the weight of this boy. And sure enough, within a few moments, the entire stage collapses under both of us. No. We jump off the stage, the podium falls down, the bottle of water, the notes, the mic, everything smashes, and 600 high school boys went ballistic. They were like chimpanzees in a Super Bowl commercial. Like, ah! They just went nuts, and finally all the dust settled. I'm like, they feed you good here, don't they? And he's like, yeah, they do. And so just finish the whole rest of the assembly on the floor. So
okay, so you had a broken stage behind you, and you were in front of it.
Yeah, it was a good icebreaker. It was really.
You know, it's funny. I've been doing this for a long time, but I don't have good stories like you.
Yeah.
My wife's like that. Like, we'll have the same experience. Oh, I got one story. We'll have the same experience, and as she's recounting it, she's got like a Hollywood way of viewing the world. It's not that she's being untruthful. It's just, I don't... Does that make sense?
Yeah.
She's like relays reality in a much more exciting way. Here's the exciting thing that happened. It wasn't really awkward, but my wife and I were driving through Nashville after a speaking engagement, and we took all of our kids with us, and we had stopped at this coffee shop. It was like a coffee shop. Well, it's like gas station, but it was good coffee. I know gas station coffee sounds terrible, and the fella was helping us out, and he brought us the coffee, and he saw that we had 4 kids. You've probably heard me tell you this. He said, geez, don't you guys have a TV?
Oh boy.
And I said, if you think TV's better than sex, you're not doing it right. And I was so happy because most of my life involves me thinking 3 hours later what would have been a great thing to say.
Yeah. Perfect timing.
But you have 8 kids.
Yes. Yeah.
Well done.
8 kiddos. Blessed. Wow. Nothing better. It's like
what kind of comments do you get?
It's like owning a restaurant where your customers never leave. You know, I mean, but there's nothing better. I mean, we're spoiled so rotten. You know, and people look at us like they pity us. You know, like, what are you thinking? Like, I remember Kristalina was once at a grocery store, and she had like probably 4 of the kids with her, and was this grocery cart overflowing, and 2 women right behind her said out loud, right in front of her, "Why would any woman ever want to do that to themselves?" Meaning, like, you're inflicting punishment by giving life to others, inflicting that punishment on yourself, and you just have to look at them with just pity and love, you know. So, I mean, yeah, we hear the comments, you know.
That's
you get
that spirit of the world we were talking about.
Yeah, you know, but I just feel sorry for them because I mean, the children the church teaches are the supreme gift of marriage. It's almost like, imagine you get married and you get to the reception, there's all your presents there, then there's one present like the size of a refrigerator. Imagine seeing that and being like, oh, well, we'll open that up in like 5 years when we know each other better. It's like, no, you'd go for that one first. It's the supreme gift. And people say, well, we don't want to have kids until we want to get to know each other better, then we'll have kids. I'm like, oh, have kids. You'll get to know each other real good. So...
My new advice for young people, and I'm saying it unironically, is get married before you're ready and then have more kids than you can afford.
Yeah, you know, and God knows what you can mentally afford.
Yeah, that doesn't mean don't discern. It's just that we often hide behind the word discernment.
Yeah.
Because no one can argue with you. You're like, I'm discerning. Well, that sounds holy.
Yeah. You know, and... You know, people tell me like, oh, how do you afford all these kids? Like, but you become more productive when you have kids. You invest more wisely. You earn, you work harder. You spend differently. And ultimately, God's the Father. And He's never going to leave His children unprovided for. And there's never been a day the lights haven't been on, the food hasn't been on the table. Yep. You trust the Father.
Thank you. All right, so I cannot see the timer. You need to know that. So from now on, you need to let me know. But I am so honored because I've heard great things about this very good Archbishop. Archbishop Anthony Fisher is going to join us on set. Yeah. We have to meet you today.
Great to be with you.
Why is everyone laughing? Oh, there's the timer. Oh, you're 10 minutes. Where did you grow up?
Here in Sydney.
Okay. And when did you join the priesthood? How old were you?
So I entered the Dominicans when I was nearly 25. I was ordained in 1991 as a priest. I was ordained as a bishop 20 years ago.
And if somebody had told you when you joined the seminary that you'd one day be the Archbishop of Sydney,
I would have run away.
Good thing they didn't tell you that then. I had a couple of questions. You were just over in Rome. Could you please help me understand what the word synod means? Okay. And what was the synod of synodality like?
Okay.
Careful. Yeah. Matt likes to ease into the interviews.
Someone asked me if synod, that the word sin was in there deliberately. No. It's S-Y-N, sin as in with. And odos means with someone on the road, on the way. So the idea is that we're together, going together somewhere, like the 2 disciples on the road with Jesus on the way to Emmaus. The synodality idea is that we should think of ourselves as a pilgrim people, all together with Christ on the way to heaven, and that means that we should be constantly listening to each other, and above all to Him, through listening to each other, supporting each other, getting each other on the way to heaven, so on the way to God. That's how I understand synodality. Historically, synods were normally gatherings of bishops in particular. Sometimes they had lay advisors, theologians and others to advise them, but principally they have been meetings of bishops. But this recent one was different in that a number of the full members of the synod were lay people.
Right. I mean, there's obviously been a lot of controversy around the synod. I hear that people are trying to push for women priests, maybe that the church change its teaching on certain sexual acts. I don't know how much you can say, but was that prevalent at the synod? Was that a hot topic among the people you were chatting with, or?
Look, I think the topics that were raised were pretty clear in the Instrumentum Laboris that was made public before the meeting, and we did follow that, so you can guess what topics got some discussion. But interestingly, the Pope kept saying before the meeting, during the meeting and since the meeting, Catholic teaching is not going to change on things like the ordination of women, like the purpose of sex being marriage and the procreation of children, that celibacy is a great gift in the church, and he's not going to be, he said he'd rather die than be the Pope that stopped celibacy for the priesthood. So I think, despite those who want to use synodality for various causes of the age, the Pope himself's made it very clear that that's not what it's about and not what he's looking for.
And I was heartened to see that he actually rebuked the German bishops recently. Maybe people don't know about that. Would you share with
So that in Germany they have been pursuing a so-called synodal way, where they've had a series of assemblies involving lay associations as well as bishops, and they have called for complete change of Catholic sexual teaching, change of the church order, of a lot of the things the ways we celebrate the sacraments and more. And it has certainly alarmed Rome, and there have been a number of interventions from the prefect, the doctrine of the faith, and also from the Holy Father, saying to them, keep communion with the church, with the apostolic tradition. You might be from a very rich country, you might be highly educated, whatever, you need Christ and you need the church as much as everyone else. And I think I'm fully with the Pope in calling us all into communion.
I had a great time several years ago. I got to speak in Uganda and meet some wonderful Catholic leaders there. What was it like meeting the African church, the Asian church?
It was one of the real joys of the synod for me, that the way we met was normally we were in tables of about 12 people for much of the time, and we heard each other and got to know each other. You'd be at the same table for about a week, and then you'd move to another table and you'd meet another group of 12 people. And I really felt at the end of that month, I had got to know a number of bishops and lay leaders from around the world in a way that I never had at a Vatican meeting before. And some of them were very impressive, and I was delighted to meet. For instance, I got to know quite a number of the African bishops, some Asian bishops. I was on the English-speaking tables, so it tended to be Africans, Middle Easterners, Europeans and Asians at those tables, as well as Americans. And you might be pleased to know, I think the Americans did very well.
You sound surprised.
You know, I was saying this to you the other night because, you hear a lot about what people are pushing, and there's a lot of confusion, not just in the church. It feels like society and institutions are coming apart at the seams everywhere right now. I don't know what's happening. But I do take kind of hope in this. I don't know any successful Catholic YouTube channels that are promoting heresy or sexual deviancy. Do you know what I mean? That's interesting, right? You would think if it's as prevalent as we fear that it is, that there's got to be someone out there being church needs to change their teaching on this, or we need women priests. But like, can you think of one YouTube channel that has more than, I don't know, anyone?
No, I mean, it's the same with religious orders. Any religious order in the church that's promoting true faithfulness, Eucharistic adoration, the truths of faith, they're bursting at the seams with vocations. But then those that are trying to bend things back, and say, oh no, well, we don't need celibacy, we don't need this. Their typical median age of their vocation is like 75, 80 years old. They don't have postulants, they don't have novitiates joining. They're not bursting at the seams because many aren't even wearing the habits. And a lot of single young adult women are like, well, why would I just put on a lapel pin and talk about social justice and give up a marriage and a family for that? Why would I go that far? And so the religious orders that I see that are bursting at the seams are habit, head to toe, Eucharistic, Marian, and 100% faithful to the Holy Catholic Church.
Earlier this year, I took 1,000 young people from Sydney to World Youth Day in Lisbon. And 300 of them, including some in this room, came with me to the Holy Land on the way. And at the very beginning, we had a mass at the University of Bethlehem. And my young people were just being themselves, being beautiful, faithful, worshipping God with all their hearts. An official from the university said to me afterwards, oh, your young people are very pious. And I thought, he doesn't mean that as a compliment. Oh. And I said, well, brother, let me tell you, today it's a choice between that and atheism. For their generation, you either take religion seriously and heart and soul, or you get carried away with the culture into who knows what. And so I've no doubt the young people I take to World Youth Day are more full on about their faith than they were 20 years ago when I first started taking groups to World Youth Day.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think when I was a kid, and maybe when my parents were kids, the rebellious thing to do would be to kind of kick against the system and against authority and against your school teachers. But today, when Matt Walsh once said, when your 8th grade math teacher, Karen, thinks Black Lives Matter is cool, it's no longer cool. Or like when they think social Marxism's a great idea, like it's really, really not. Yeah. So what I'm seeing like in my kids and their friends is there's a real kind of revulsion to the obvious agendas that are being pushed on them from Disney and other places. These newer movies remind me of lame Christian movies from the 80s where the story didn't matter, we just had something to preach at you, and it feels like the kids are rebelling.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's some cause for hope here.
Well, when vice is the norm, the only rebellious thing to be is virtuous. And I think that's what we're looking at. I was at a high school just last week in Louisiana. They got about 1,000 kids in the school. More than 700 of them are involved in campus ministry. It was beautiful because they wanted to be good, and the school just needed to create a culture in which it's easier to be good, and they gravitated towards it. They wanted to live lives of heroic virtue. And so in the midst of the world, I think this is what's truly appealing, is to live a countercultural life, which isn't really countercultural. You're the only ones actually building up the authentic culture.
I've been really impressed with your priests. Just like manly. Thank you for wearing the cassock. It's so cool. Like, it's so manly. It's just, and I imagine that a lot of these have been influenced by the late George Cardinal Pell. Could you talk a little bit about I know many people here are probably aware of it, but for those who are watching, about the false accusations that were leveled against him, about how he kind of, in my estimation, heroically endured that hatred. He was physically spat on. What was he like? Because I only met him once in an aeroplane for about 5 seconds. Okay. And I didn't get a lot from that interaction.
Well, I knew him very well. He was a huge influence on me and a very dear friend from when I met him in the 1980s till he died last year. At the beginning of this year, I happily was in Rome for Pope Benedict's funeral and spent a few days with George in what turned out to be the last week of his life. Neither of us knew that, but it was a real gift from God for me to have that precious time with him towards the end for him. He was a man of great faith, of deep prayer, very, very faithful to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Christ was absolutely the Lord of his life in everything. It wasn't about politics, it wasn't about fame, it wasn't about ambition, it was about Christ. And he loved his church, and he wanted to share that with the world. And when you see, if you read his prison diaries, how after being falsely accused, falsely convicted, falsely imprisoned, any of us would be bitter after that. I'm afraid that I would be bitter. It would make me angry with the world, maybe with God, certainly with the judicial system and my accusers, when he knew full well he was innocent. He came out of prison, if anything, more gentle, more merciful, more forgiving than he went in. He called it his 404 days in solitary confinement, his long retreat. And he did seem to come out of this retreat an even better man. And, well, I hope all of us can endure persecution in such a spirit and be the better for it.
Yeah, because I can imagine, like, in my mind, if I endure persecution but everyone knows I'm innocent, like, yeah. But if everyone thinks I've done evil things and you're in this prison cell knowing that the news media is taking it to 11 and they're trying to convince everybody he's done something he hasn't, that just must be such a lonely place to be in. What was he like do you have any kind of anecdotes about him?
Not ones I can tell here. He had a wicked sense of humour. He loved to tease people. He would... I remember one day going to him as a young auxiliary bishop and saying, look, I can't cope with any more jobs. You keep giving me... I keep getting these letters saying, thank you for accepting appointment 2, XYZ. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm on 22 committees at the moment. And he said, really? Well, you know, if you've got time to count how many committees you're on, I can put you on another one. That's his sort of sense of humour. It was wicked and very amusing. I remember he told me once that he was trying to explain Australian humour to officials in the Vatican. And he said, you know, in Australia, if you really like someone, you slap them on the back and say, oh, you old bastard. And this official said, bastard? They accuse your mother of immorality and you think this is friendly? And George said, well, in Australia, that's friendly.
I think Matt used the words 4 times last night in his presentations.
You know, I'm sure as a bishop you keep abreast of what's going on in the church, but Jason and I were talking last night about how when you invest emotional energy in things that you have not been given authority over, it reduces your capacity to lead in the ways you've actually been called to lead, to have authority over the things you really actually should have authority over. And I get it. You know, I remember my parents, who were very beautiful people, they would watch the news every night, you know, and I just, you know, I said, why? I don't want to do this. And why do you watch the news? And they said, well, don't you want to know what's going on in the world? Which I think is just a defensive way, because I don't know, I think it was more about entertainment, you know. I think news is often more about entertainment, but we pretend it's this sophisticated thing where I'm educating myself, when much of the time, maybe just some of the time, we're entertaining that sin of curiosity that Aquinas talks about, right? We don't often think of curiosity as a sin, but when we invest our mental energy in things not for the glory of God, things that don't concern us, I guess what I'm asking is, do you agree? And then what advice do you have to us young Catholics who are being bombarded constantly with bad news, not only around the world, within our country, but within our church?
I think you're quite right. When St. Thomas says the curiositas is a sin, a vice. He's not saying we shouldn't be inquirers. He's the big one for pushing us to ask the big questions in life, to keep asking the big questions and searching for the big answers and go to the reliable places to find the right answers. So he wants us to be curious in that sense that we use the word, but he doesn't want us to be distracted. You know, the kind of person that goes to the library to look for a book to answer this essay question, and they find another book on another question, and they start reading that, and then another one over here, and they never get to finish their essay or even to start it. And look at how that happens on the internet, where you go looking for X and you go click, 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 and who knows where you went up. That's curiositas. That's a kind of distracted interest in things. That means you don't focus on the important things, on what you're really called to be focused on. Now, I remember talking to my mum about this. She, in her last days, got very connected with the internet world, principally because she discovered Facebook was a very good form of surveillance on your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And so she was constantly surveilling what we're all up to, as best she could through Facebook and other means. But she also got onto some blogs that were really very negative about the church, about the world, about everything. And they really disturbed her. And I remember having a conversation about this, and I said, Mum, don't read them. They're just making you bleak. They're not what you're called to at this time in your life. You know, she's now in a nursing home at this time. I lost her late in the last year, just past. But I said, you're not called at this time to be having opinions on everything in the world and being dark about most of it. We need you praying for the things you can pray for, like those children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who I know you're surveilling through the Facebook. And so I think, if you think of the Screwtape Letters, what's the devil doing to trick us into going the wrong way? Well, one of the ways can be giving us lots of apparent information, news, but actually what it's about is making us gloomy, making us dark on everything, and critical and angry, indignant, and losing confidence, even in our church, even in our gospel, even in ourselves under grace. And I think we should be saying, no, some of this stuff is not good for me. Some of this stuff is actually from the evil one. It's going to make my heart dark, and I'm going to go for things that will inspire me, what my real vocation is, that will make me want to share the gospel, the love of Jesus Christ with all the world.
Thank you. And Jason, you said that great thing last night. I'll never forget it, about if you knew everything.
Yeah, I mean, we were just discussing, you can go down a rabbit hole of online news stories about everything going on in the church and these conspiracy theories and what about this and what about that. And, you know, at the end of the day, I thought, like, okay, what if I knew the depths of every conspiracy theory regarding the church, the depths of the truth of every single thing? What would I even do with that information? Right. Nothing. Yeah. Because I'm not entrusted with the entire church. I'm entrusted with my domestic church. That's what I'm in charge of. And so sometimes we got to turn it off, and I think have the attitude like St. John the 23rd had. When he'd go to bed at night, sometimes he'd look out the window to the Vatican, to the world, and he said, God, it's your church, I'm going to bed.
Archbishop, they're telling me to wrap up. It's been lovely to chat with you. I hope we get another chance to talk, but God bless you. Thank you for being a good bishop, and thanks for having us.
Can I thank you for praising my young priests and young religious here in Sydney. We've got some great priests and religious young ones here in Sydney. I could do with a few thousand more. So you keep encouraging them. Thank you. God bless you all.
Thank you, Archbishop.